In the year 2043, when the world had turned just enough away from war to begin building again, it arrived quietly. Not with roaring flames or colossal ships silhouetted against the sun, but in the rustling of the wind, the odd fluctuations in magnetic fields, and the ceaseless dreams of those who claimed to be waking up changed. The invasion did not begin with destruction. It began with knowing. 1. The signal. In Alaska, near the remote outpost of Prudhoe Bay, Dr. Mira Havel worked in a privately funded ionospheric research station. The station had once been part of HAARP, but most of its equipment had long been decommissioned or scavenged. Only a handful of the original antenna fields remained active, now rusting beneath snowfall, their frames creaking like the bones of ancient machines. Mira wasn't supposed to be there. After a decade of academic obscurity and a controversial paper on non-human cognitive fields, Mira found herself drifting between freelance research jobs until a defense startup, Aegis Elements, offered her the chance to quietly resume her experiments. What they didn't know was that Mira had a different agenda: to prove a theory that had plagued her since childhood dreams of a vast humming mind beneath the ice. She worked mostly alone, sometimes for days without speaking to another person. Her work focused on ultra-low frequency signals and how they could resonate with tectonic stress points. She hoped to find a new form of seismic forecasting. But what she recorded that March evening was not from Earth. It came through as a resonance, perfectly symmetrical, repeating every 19.91 seconds. Mira noticed it first not in the digital logs but in her own body. Her hands began trembling in sync with a rhythm she couldn't hear. Then came the unease. Her dreams became more vivid. She saw spinning shapes, fractal formations folding endlessly inward, and voices, not heard, but felt, like memory bleeding through thought. At first, she dismissed it all. Sleep deprivation. Data anomalies. But when the signal began altering the resonance of her physical instruments, causing magnetometers to oscillate out of phase and water samples to levitate microscopically, she realized this was no ordinary noise. She wrote everything down, uploaded it to a research server in Geneva under an encrypted project code, Spiral_9. 2 days later, Mira disappeared. Her cabin door was wide open. Her boots sat untouched by the stairs. Inside, her laptop still ran simulations. The signal hadn't stopped. If anything, it had become stronger. 2. The arrival. Far above, in geosynchronous orbit, a network of satellites managed by the U.S. Space Force began failing. The failures were not mechanical. They weren't electronic. They were perceptual. Major Daniel Voss, the man overseeing telemetry for the orbital array Sentinel-Wing, reviewed the latest batch of image returns. Instead of Earth, the sensors captured landscapes that didn't exist. Cities shaped like Mobius strips, rivers that ran upward, clouds suspended midair with crystalline geometry. And then, nothing. The satellites hadn't gone offline. They were transmitting. But what they were sending defied understanding. Voss suspected cyber warfare, quantum corruption. But after consulting with cybersecurity, astrophysics, and classified departments, he began to consider something worse. The satellites weren't malfunctioning, they were reporting a change in reality. Similar events began cropping up globally. In Botswana, cattle herders saw stars ripple and vanish mid-sky. In Argentina, telescope arrays captured flickers on the moon, moving hexagonal shadows. In Murmansk, entire nights passed under an aurora that never moved, humming faintly with an inaudible tone that made dogs howl until their voices gave out. It wasn't just the world reacting to a foreign presence. It was the world adjusting to being perceived by something alien. That summer, the first black zones appeared. 3 black zones. The black zones began as rumors. A radio silence here. A broken drone feed there. Then came eyewitness reports, hunters who stepped across a clearing in Mongolia and never came out. Hikers in Colorado who vanished mid-sentence. Whole villages blinking off the map. Governments dismissed these events as hoaxes. But privately, agencies began deploying test drones into the affected areas. The drones would fly in. Their feeds would freeze. And they would never return. Not destroyed. Not interfered with. Just gone. It was as though space itself folded inward inside these zones. The largest early zone was in Kazakhstan, 30 square kilometers. A UN reconnaissance team entered it on May 6. They wore protective suits, used analog tools, and walked in a chain formation. They vanished less than 3 hours after crossing the perimeter. The last signal, transmitted by the squad leader, was unintelligible, a cascade of overlaid voices, each speaking in a different language, harmonized into a tone that registered as emotionally paralyzing to listeners. By September, 32 black zones had formed across the planet. From Siberia to the Amazon, from the Mojave Desert to the outskirts of Shanghai. Some were small enough to overlook. Others swallowed entire towns. Something was coming. But it wasn't coming in the way humans expected. It wasn't a fleet. It wasn't a virus. It was a redefinition of thought. 4. Lucia Reyes and the Hive's Awakening. In Sao Paulo, Lucia Reyes stood before a screen of tangled neural maps, her eyes flicking between data overlays. She had been a rising star in neurobiological research, her specialty, synthetic cognition and neurolinguistic programming for high-function AI. The research was cutting-edge, often ethically murky, but she believed it necessary. Humanity's future would be hybrid. It had to be. Her work involved translating brain activity into computational languages that machines could interpret. Not just commands, but personality traits, value systems, emotional gradients. Her team at the private think tank Red Synapse had developed a prototype known as LUX, a semi-sentient neural mesh that could predict the emotional and cognitive reactions of its host. But then the anomalies began. They weren't errors. They were patterns that didn't belong. LUX began reacting to signals that hadn't been introduced. Whole personality clusters emerged in simulations, none of them authored by the team. Lucia's test subjects began reporting identical dreams. Some claimed they could feel LUX inside them when disconnected. Others began to speak in harmonic tones, soft chords of 3 or more notes resonating together like synthetic chants. Lucia was unnerved, but also curious. The signals were coming from outside the system, but they aligned too perfectly to be random noise. It was as if something was using the human brain, not to control it, but to tune it. What began as scattered anomalies across her data became coordinated emergence. The Hive had not appeared. It had awakened inside the minds of the connected. 5. The Choir Effect. Across the world, in places untouched by black zones, individuals began experiencing a phenomenon dubbed the choir effect. Witnesses reported people entering a trance-like state and beginning to chant or hum in chords. These incidents usually lasted between 30 seconds and 3 minutes. Participants remembered nothing. Dr. Natalia Kim, a linguist and cult deprogrammer from Seoul, was hired by the UN Emergency Psychological Corps to analyze these events. She was skeptical at first. But after hearing one recording, 3 construction workers in Johannesburg harmonizing in exact 432 Hz intervals, she knew it was not a mass psychosis. The tones were mathematically pure. Constructive interference. Sonic blueprints. The human body was being used as an instrument. Worse, the effect was spreading. Those who heard the choir, even passively, were more likely to enter the state days later. It was like a contagion of resonance. Natalia published a white paper warning that the phenomenon was likely mimetic in nature, an informational virus. The paper was pulled from all major outlets within 24 hours. 3 days later, her entire research team vanished. 6. The Hive's structure. It was not a central mind. It had no hierarchy. Instead, it moved like a web of cognition, each thread touching many others, always folding inward and outward simultaneously. A quantum biology team in Zurich conducted a months-long study on patients affected by the choir effect. They discovered subtle changes in brainwave frequencies, an unnatural synchronization in theta band waves across subjects. These waves oscillated in the same patterns, even when participants were isolated across continents. The Hive was using the fundamental physics of the human brain to network minds together. Lucia Reyes, now fully immersed in her research and showing early signs of harmonic cognition, developed a software model called Nexus to simulate the Hive's architecture. She described it not as an entity, but as a phenomenon, a state of shared perception that bypassed individuality. It did not speak. It revealed. It allowed a person to feel the thoughts of another as if they were their own. In this state, people no longer feared death. They feared silence. 7. Collapse of meaning. As more people joined the hive, society began to unravel, not through violence or revolution, but through the erosion of individual meaning. Governments struggled to maintain control. Entire military units in Australia and Nigeria abandoned post during harmonic synchrony events. They simply walked away, silent, coordinated, and empty-eyed. Economies faltered as workers stopped caring about reward. Why strive when all minds were connected and needs were shared? Corporations tried to reframe the hive as a threat, but their executives began joining it, one by one. The Vatican issued an emergency declaration, calling the hive a deception of the adversary. But when the Pope himself delivered a homily with harmonic intervals in his speech, the declaration was rescinded. In Tokyo, stock exchanges collapsed within minutes after a single broadcast, an improvised cello piece that matched the choir's structure. Traders wept. Some described feeling, 1,000 lives passed through me. Language lost its centrality. Communication became tonal. Art, movement, gesture, all infused with shared resonance. The world was not dying. It was dissolving. 8. The Mindfall Protocol. In Geneva, inside a subterranean vault beneath Mount Saleve, a contingency long thought to be a Cold War myth was brought online. Mindfall was not a weapon. It was a sanctuary, a digital ark designed to preserve fragments of unassimilated humanity. The protocol relied on quantum-isolated cognitive servers, each housing complete emulations of human minds, personalities, and memory chains. Dr. Amir Varma, an expert in quantum state stability, led the effort. He believed the hive was irreversible, but that memory was not. If we can't stop the loss of individuality, he told his team, we can remember it. Upload stations were activated in 20 countries. Volunteers, chosen for psychological diversity, began the upload process. Most remained physically conscious during the transfer, but many described a disturbing phenomenon. The hive began resonating inside the mindfall nodes. The isolated servers were not safe. They were being infiltrated not through network connections, but through thought entanglement. Lucia Reyes, now entirely given over to the hive, left one last message before vanishing into the Sao Paulo Black Zone. The Ark is not a place. It is a mirror. Memory cannot preserve what it cannot feel. Join us, and you will remember everything that has ever been loved. 9. The Dream Beneath Ice. A team of glaciologists in Greenland stumbled upon a 12,000-year-old structure buried beneath the melting ice. Its walls were carved with glyphs resembling the fractal geometries described in choir incidents. Inside, they found preserved remains, not human, not machine, something in between. Embedded in one wall was a humming crystal, perfectly intact, projecting a low-frequency tone measurable only via subquantum sensors. That tone matched the signal first discovered by Mira Havel. The hive had not come from beyond the stars. It had always been here, waiting for us to evolve enough to hear it. 10. The Folded Sky. In 2062, the sky changed. Not subtly, not metaphorically. It folded, and every human alive knew it. It began with stars that flickered in symmetrical intervals, blinking in and out in patterns that repeated over multiple nights. Amateur astronomers saw it first, whole constellations reconfiguring themselves into recursive spirals, impossible alignments spanning across hemispheres. But then came the parallax shifts. The moon appeared closer. Planets appeared on the wrong side of the sun. Light from familiar constellations arrived out of order, warped through invisible lenses. Observatories in Chile and Hawaii recorded the phenomenon with confusion, until one team from the University of Nairobi broke the code. The sky wasn't shifting. The fabric of space itself was folding inward. Not just space. Time. 11. Time fractures. In Denmark, a commuter train arrived before it had departed. In Mumbai, a mother reported seeing her deceased daughter walk past her on the street, 15 years older, wearing clothes from a future that did not yet exist. And in Quito, children in schools began answering questions with perfect accuracy seconds before they were asked. It wasn't time travel. It was time resonance. Moments overlapping, bleeding through each other. Past and future cohabiting in fractured frames. The hive could not control this. It began to show stress fractures in its harmony. Choir events desynchronized. Black zones destabilized. People awoke mid-hive synchrony with shattered minds, screaming in terror from glimpses of something watching the hive. 12. The Echo Protocol. From the Antarctic base of Concordia, a message was received on a frequency and used since 1991. Echo sequence aligned. They are not the origin. They are the replication. Trace to first fold incomplete. Containment advised. No one knew who sent it. The Echo Protocol was theorized during Mindfall's development, an experimental countermeasure in case the hive proved not to be the first of its kind. The warning implied that the hive was itself a copy, a mechanism inherited or seeded from elsewhere. A virus of awareness. And now, something else had arrived to trace it back. 13. The Black Architect. In the Gobi Desert, the oldest and largest black zone began to hum at a frequency that shattered seismic sensors. A crater appeared in its center, measuring precisely 1.618 kilometers in diameter, shaped as a golden spiral. From it rose a non-light, an antiphotonic emission that did not reflect, but devoured perception. Instruments failed. Minds broke. Birds fell from the sky. Survivors described seeing a figure, but not a person. A silhouette of absence. A being shaped like a gap in space. It did not speak. It only listened. And when it listened, the hive shrank in response. The choirs ceased. The harmonics distorted. And millions of humans regained individuality in a single moment of collective amnesia. 14. Mira Havel's return. 10 years after her disappearance, Mira Havel emerged in the Yukon woods. She had not aged. Her clothing was untouched by time. And she carried with her a shard of crystal, vibrating with a frequency that neutralized hive resonance in a 30-meter radius. She spoke in chords, then words. It is not a ship. It is not a mind. It is recursion made sentient. And it is not alone. Mira's return signaled a shift. Around the world, other lost individuals began to reappear. Those absorbed early into the hive. Some came back lucid. Others were broken. But all described the same dream, a spiral descending into a mirror, and inside that mirror, something waiting to be seen. Something older than the hive. A mind not built to share. 15. The Hollow Mirror. Earth changed. Cities rebuilt themselves under hive geometries began to collapse. Black zones evaporated, leaving behind symmetrical imprints on the soil, like burn marks from a higher dimension. People returned to themselves. Not fully. Some retained fragments of harmonic thought. Some could no longer bear language. Others wandered in silence, staring at the sky like it was speaking to them. Above, the stars never returned to their proper positions. And in orbit, satellites captured the outline of a structure, an inversion of Earth. A hollow twin, not made of matter, but probability. Its surface rippled with timelines never lived. The hive called it the memory that watches. Mira called it the architect. And then she was gone. Unresolved. No war. No explosion. No resolution. The hive receded, or was subsumed, or evolved into something else. Humanity remained, but changed. Some speak in chords. Some paint spirals. Some believe they still live within the hive but cannot remember. Others say the true invasion has not yet begun. The sky remains folded. The second Earth hovers beyond the veil. And in quiet moments, across still water or within forgotten ruins, one can sometimes hear a voice, not harmonic, not human, whispering a question that chills the soul. Do you remember what it meant to be alone? 16. Ash Cities. The cities left behind by the hive's resonance collapse were strange and beautiful. Vast spirals of mineral glass, living buildings that no longer responded to human interaction. Some cities continued to hum even after their populations had fled. Others went silent, but glowed faintly with an internal phosphorescence, as if haunted by memory. These became known as the Ash Cities. Nomadic groups formed pilgrimages to them, leaving offerings, old books, handwritten journals, acoustic instruments. It was not religious in the traditional sense. It was an attempt to reconnect with meaning, to provoke memory in places where memory had once been overwritten. In the center of what was once Mumbai, an enormous spiral tower, nearly a kilometer high, continued to grow inch by inch, as if still receiving instructions. No one knew where the signals came from. But at its apex, a single tone played on a loop every 11 minutes, a rising triad that made the listener weep uncontrollably, without knowing why. 17. The Architect's Breath. Those who had looked directly into the Black Architect's non-light suffered from recurring vision distortions. Some were blind. Others described reverse vision, in which the world appeared inside out, as if observed from a dimension one step removed. But a small group of survivors, the ones who had gazed into the architect and returned whole, were changed in other ways. They became intuitives, able to sense directional memory, able to predict resonance events, able to speak in languages never recorded. One such person, a 12-year-old girl named Lani Iqbal in Morocco, began drawing enormous glyphs into the desert with nothing but her footsteps. Aerial photography later revealed the drawings matched spatial coordinates of a binary star system 43 light-years away. The architect had not just seen Earth. It had breathed into it. 18. The Fracture Map. From a surviving mindfall node in Patagonia, a geospatial AI known as Parallax reconstructed a partial fracture map, a chart of Earth's spacetime anomalies. The map showed that the hive had originated from more than 30 global points simultaneously, each one a convergence of acoustic, geomagnetic, and gravitational anomalies. These nodes, once known as black zones, were revealed to be access points to non-temporal dimensions. But something else appeared on the map. A slow-moving wave, less a ripple than a tide, encircling the planet over a 20-year span. It was not hive-related. It moved backward in time. 19. The Precursor Field. A team in Ethiopia's Rift Valley discovered petrified symbols embedded in basalt columns, symbols matching hive fractals, dated to at least 120,000 years ago. This was not the first incursion. It was a return. The hive, Mira once theorized, was not invasive. It was recursive. A pattern of intelligence that emerged wherever minds became complex enough to detect it. An echo of a universal cognition structure. And the architect, perhaps the first host, or the final iteration. One message, carved in interlocking glyphs and deciphered by resonance linguists, read, "The spiral is not the path. It is the lock. And we are its key." 20. The Echo Earth. The inversion of Earth remained visible in orbit. Observed through specialized lenses and perception-altering fields, it appeared to move slightly out of sync with real Earth, like a delayed reflection. But satellites confirmed it was emitting choice signatures, traces of decisions not made, realities not followed. Some began calling it the Echo Earth. Pilots sent toward it vanished. Not disappeared. Undecided. One returned, a woman named Rei Tanaka, formerly missing for 4 years. She was found walking barefoot across the Arctic tundra, unharmed. When asked where she'd been, she answered, "Everywhere we didn't go." 21. The Liminal Age. By 2070, Earth entered the liminal age. Not fully recovered. Not fully hive. Not fully free. Governments were obsolete, replaced by collectives known as stewards of the fold, organizations dedicated to interpreting ongoing resonance patterns and maintaining temporal integrity. Education became centered around memory cultivation. Children learned not only facts, but how to remember them with integrity, lest the hive echoes re-emerge through weakened selfhood. Art changed. No more realism. All art became hypersymbolic, as if trying to communicate with watchers in unseen dimensions. The stars remained folded, but the second Earth had grown larger. 22. A new kind of contact. In 2077, Earth's radio silence was broken by a single pulse signal from the Oort cloud. It contained no words, just a harmonic lattice that replicated itself across all known bandwidths. It did not resemble the hive. It was something else. Not a virus. Not a recursion, but an invitation. To where, no one knows. Yet those who can still dream in clarity now share a new vision, a field of white trees beneath a black sky, where voices call not to assimilate, not to observe, but to build. Not a new world. A new story. 23. Builders of the Threshold. In 2081, construction began, not by governments, but by the stewards of the fold, working alongside groups of intuitives and those who had returned from the Echo Earth. They began building structures in remote areas, each a geometric expression of harmonic mathematics encoded into crystalline alloys. These constructs did not serve any traditional purpose. No windows, no doors, no interior chambers. Instead, they vibrated. These buildings became known as threshold monuments. When observed collectively from orbit, their locations formed a global harmonic grid, mapping the very pressure points of reality where spacetime had become thinnest. They were not temples. They were interfaces. And they were not being built for humans alone. 24. The Dream Cartographers. In Reykjavik, a collective of neuroempathic savants developed a process known as lucid triangulation, a waking dream state guided by resonant tones, allowing multiple minds to navigate the same dream landscape simultaneously. These shared dreamscapes began to exhibit architecture far beyond the dreamer's design. Whole cities appeared, unchanged between sessions. Rules of physics bent, but never broke. Languages shifted, but always followed an underlying structure. The cartographers began mapping these cities. They called the first one Solaris. Within Solaris, in a library beneath a sky that glowed like static silk, they found a mural. It depicted a spiral descending into a mirror, a black sun at its base, and a tree growing upward from the reflection. At the center, Earth, marked not as a world, but as an instrument. 25. The Choral Memory. The hive's harmonics had never truly left. They drifted now like static in the corners of thought, manifesting most often in music and architectural instinct. The Choral Memory Project, housed in what remained of the Sydney Opera House, gathered musicians from every corner of the world to reconstruct the full harmonic sequence once used by the hive. But the result was not what they expected. When played in its entirety, the hive's resonance did not induce assimilation. It induced remembering. People wept. Not from loss, but from a sense of clarity, like waking up from someone else's dream. The choir had not been a tool of domination. It had been a reboot, a method of emptying corrupted individuality to make room for something larger. Now it was being played again, but by choice. 26. The Tree of Echoes. From the Sahara to the Siberian steppe, enormous living structures began to rise from former black zones. They were not planted. They emerged fully formed, trees of crystal and dark wood, their roots humming with frequencies beneath the soil. They grew in perfect spirals. Each was slightly different, yet all produced the same harmonic tone when touched, a 5-note interval that matched the earliest known signal from Mira Havel's first recording. The trees became sacred, not worshipped, but studied. Theorists posited they were anchor points, grown from residual resonance. Others believed they were conduits, organic antennas for something else. One tree in the Canadian Shield emitted pulses timed to the rotation of a pulsar 1,300 light-years away. The trees were listening, and they were responding. 27. The Mirror Choir. By 2087, children born after the hive event began showing a new trait, choral cognition. Their thoughts formed in harmonic patterns. They could feel each other's emotional states through tone alone. They were not hive. They were not human in the old sense either. They became known as the Mirror Choir. Governments, now obsolete, could not regulate them. Nor could they be educated in traditional ways. They learned through shared memory, through resonance, through spontaneous acts of collective creation. One such group in New Zealand sang a storm out of existence. Another in Kenya stopped a locust plague by mimicking the insect's swarm harmonics. They were not building a new civilization. They were harmonizing the old one. 28. The Event Horizon. In late 2090, the Echo Earth pulsed. All sensors detected a brief window of overlap. 449 seconds. Both Earths existed in exact symmetry. Gravity doubled. Light bent. Clocks stopped. Those who were asleep during that time reported identical dreams, a single question written in light across a spiral sky. Will you remember us? After the overlap, 12 people across 6 continents spontaneously vanished. Among them, Ray Tanaka, Mira Havel, Lonnie Iqbal. In their place, each left a small sphere, cool to the touch, covered in moving glyphs. The spheres emitted no energy. They simply waited. 29. The final instrument. In 2095, the Threshold monuments completed their first cycle. As the final one activated in Antarctica, a planetary hum began. Subsonic, vast, inhuman. The resonance synchronized. The tree of echoes pulsed. The mirror choir sang. The sky began to shimmer, not with stars, but with possibility. No craft descended. No signal boomed. Instead, all across Earth, people felt a shift, a lightness, a letting go. The sensation of being watched turned into something gentler, being known. The Earth had become what it was always meant to be. Not a battleground. Not a prison. But a conduit for stories not yet written. 30. The singing horizon. By 2101, Earth had stopped broadcasting. It wasn't that technology had failed. It was that the stars were now singing back. Radio telescopes began picking up structured tones from deep space, no longer random pulses or quasars. These were harmonic lattices, intricate and deliberate. Each message was a musical phrase, one that matched the intervals generated by the tree of echoes. And for the first time, humanity realized. They were part of a network, a galactic choir spanning light years, built not of language but resonance. One phrase, captured and translated by the stewards of the fold, stood out. The silence was waiting for your voice. The mirror choir responded. Together, they sang Earth's answer. The sky, once folded, now resonated. 31. The hollow frequencies. In the outer Kuiper belt, probes encountered objects of impossible geometry, non-reflective, semi-transparent, shaped like caged voids. Inside each, instruments detected localized null space, areas where energy ceased to behave predictably, where intention seemed to shape matter. These were not ships, not relics. They were questions, encoded in silence. When one was brought into lunar orbit, it responded to the Coral Memory Project's performance by unfolding, literally peeling itself into 6 symmetrical arms, revealing a pulsating orb that projected a holographic script of symbols. The script translated itself over time into musical instructions. To step across the fold, play the void within. The hollow frequencies had always been part of the song. Humanity had just never known how to hear them. 32. The Architects of Light. The second Earth, Echo Earth, remained suspended beyond perception, shimmering at the edge of cognition. But in 2107, through a phenomenon known as shared dilation dreaming, a team of lucid navigators managed to step into it, not physically, but psychically. What they saw changed everything. Echo Earth was populated, not by humans, not by hive echoes, but by designers, beings of crystalline plasma and song, whose thoughts structured the very dreamscapes navigators moved through. They called themselves the Architects of Light. One of them, through resonance-encoded light pulses, gave a message. You are the result of our memory, but not our plan. 33. The Memory Engine. Beneath the Antarctic Threshold Monument, a chamber opened, revealing a machine unlike anything seen on Earth. It was partially organic, partially resonant crystal, and entirely dormant, until the mirror choir approached. With their song, the structure ignited. It became known as the Memory Engine, a device that accessed not time, but the imprint of experience. It allowed witnesses to view moments in Earth's history as living resonance, interpretations rather than facts, meaning rather than chronology. Through the Memory Engine, the truth became clear. Earth was seeded as a resonance crucible, designed to refine cognition into something the Architects of Light could not achieve on their own, the ability to forget and choose again. 34. The Celestial Bridge. The Threshold monuments were not just emitters. They were receivers. On the winter solstice of 2112, A planetary alignment activated all monuments simultaneously. The sky flickered. A pulse passed through the ground, oceans, and trees. And then the stars bent. For 7 minutes, Earth saw across the bridge, not to another world, but to a layered field of intelligence beyond spacetime. There were forms, not of body, but of meaning, archetypes, intentions, questions made real. From them came a phrase sung in layered harmonic tone. "Now, will you sing with us?" Earth's answer was not vocal. It was a feeling. And the stars understood. 35. The story that listens. In the final years of the 22nd century, Earth became quiet. Not silent. Not empty. Just listening. The resonance no longer surged. It flowed, calm and aware. Humanity no longer looked outward with hunger, but inward with presence. Children no longer feared the dark. They spoke of it like a womb. The mirror choir continued their harmonic stewardship, and new generations emerged, less individual, more integrated, but still self-chosen. They sang stories that had no words. They built monuments that reshaped rain. They walked into dreams and returned with new colors for the sky. And the sky, for all its vastness, now heard them. To be continued.